Hey everybody, wanted to bring you what I think is very cool video with some early church history. This is the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as told by Oliver Cowdery in letters he wrote to W. W. Phelps that were approved by the prophet Joseph Smith and republished many, many times. There's a total of 7 letters, or 8, it might be 8, but there's a 7 or 8-ish letters that Oliver Cowdery wrote to W. W. Phelps that was used as the earliest church history, or one of the earliest church histories, and disseminated. Even little pamphlets were made for dissemination in Europe in the early church history as missionaries went forth. So this is some very awesome and closer to the source history. Even parts of it were used in our current Joseph Smith history in the Pearl of Great Price. So I'm going to get into it. I've taken out specific parts where the angel Moroni is visiting Joseph for the first time in letter 4. On the evening of the 21st of September 1823, previous to retiring to rest, our brother's mind, and our brother he's referring to is Joseph Smith Jr., was unusually wrought up on the subject which had so long agitated his mind. His heart was drawn out in fervent prayer, and his soul was so lost to everything of a temporal nature that earth to him had lost its charms, and all he desired was to be prepared in heart to commune with some kind of messenger who could communicate to him the desired information of his acceptance with God. At length the family retired, and he, as usual, bent his way, though in silence, where others might have rested their weary frames, locked fast in sleep's embrace, but repose had fled, and accustomed slumber had spread her refreshing hand over others beside him. He continued still to pray in his heart, though once hard and obdurate was softened, and that mind which had often flitted like the wild bird of passage had settled upon a determined basis, not to be decoyed or driven from its purpose. In this situation hours passed, unnumbered, how many or how few I know not. Neither is he able to inform me, but supposes it must have been 11 or 12, and perhaps later, as the noise and bustle of the family in retiring had long since ceased. While continuing in prayer for a manifestation in some way that his sins were forgiven, endeavoring to exercise faith in the Scriptures, on a sudden a light like that of day, only of a purer and far more glorious appearance and brightness, burst into the room. Indeed, to use his own description, the first sight was as though the house was filled with consuming and unquenchable fire. This sudden appearance of a light so bright as must naturally be expected occasioned a shock or sensation visible to the extremities of the body. It was, however, followed with a calmness and serenity of mind, and an overwhelming rapture of joy that surpassed understanding. And in a moment a personage stood before him. Notwithstanding the room was previously filled with light above the brightness of the sun, as I before described, yet there seemed to be an additional glory surrounding or accompanying this personage, which shone with an increased degree of brilliancy, of which he was in the midst, and though his countenance was as lightning, yet it was of a pleasing, innocent, and glorious appearance, so much so that every fear was banished from the heart, and nothing but calmness pervaded the soul. So, my first thought and observation is Joseph Smith Jr. He could have slept, he could have rested his weary frame, but instead his mind was caught upon the things of eternity. He was thinking on God and on the scriptures, and specifically he settled his mind to think upon his own standing before God, and desired deeply that God would prepare him to communicate with a messenger, and he desired to know his acceptance with God, his standing before God. What a beautiful sentiment that we can emulate, that we care more about our standing with God than our standing in the world and how we look to the world. So, in that situation, it seemed to breed this amazing experience that came forth as he pondered diligently upon those things of God. Though fear was banished from his heart, yet his surprise was no less when he heard him declare himself to be a messenger sent by commandment of the Lord, to deliver a special message to witness to him that his sins were forgiven, and that his prayers were heard, and that the scriptures might be fulfilled which say, God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the things which are mighty, and the base things of the world, and the things which are despised has God chosen, yea, and the things which are not, to bring to naught things which are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. Therefore, says the Lord, I will proceed to do a marvelous work among this people, even a marvelous work and a wonder. The wisdom of their wise shall perish, the understanding of their prudent shall be hid. For according to his covenant, which he made with his ancient saints, his people, the house of Israel, must come to a knowledge of the gospel, and own that Messiah whom their fathers rejected, and with them the fullness of the Gentiles be gathered in, to rejoice in one fold under one shepherd. This cannot be brought about until certain preparatory things are accomplished, for so has the Lord purposed in his own mind. He has therefore chosen you as an instrument in his hand to bring to light that which shall perform his act, his strange act, and bring to pass a marvelous work and a wonder. Wherever the sound shall go, it shall cause the ears of men to tingle, and wherever it shall be proclaimed, the pure in heart shall rejoice, while those who draw near to God with their mouths and honor him with their lips, while their hearts are far from him, will seek its overthrow, and the destruction of those by whose hands it is carried. Therefore marvel not if your name is made a derision, and had as a byword among such, if you are the instrument in bringing it by the gift of God to the knowledge of the people. He then proceeded and gave a general account of the promises made to the fathers, and also gave history of the aborigines of this country, and said that they were the literal descendants of Abraham. He represented them as once being an enlightened and intelligent people, possessing a correct knowledge of the gospel and the plan of restoration and redemption. He said this history was written and deposited not far from that place, and that it was our brother's privilege, if obedient to the commandments of the Lord, to obtain and translate the same. by the means of the Urim and Thummim, which were deposited for that purpose with the record. So a couple insights we gain from this. First, the Book of Mormon had to come forth. It was a preparatory thing to be accomplished before this great and marvelous work and a wonder would be fully accomplished, which the Book of Mormon is only part of. Next, we also read some interesting things about Book of Mormon geography. Moroni says that the Book of Mormon was the history of the Aborigines of this country. And this country would mean either New York, if he was talking about the country, like the countryside, or the United States, if he was talking about a country, a larger country. So not quite sure exactly, but it kind of centers the geographical possibilities being in North America, specifically the United States of America. Also, he said that the record or the history, which is the Book of Mormon that he's referring to, was written and deposited not far from that place. What is that place? The place that Moroni was visiting him, and which was in his Palmyra home in his bedroom, or in that general room that he was sharing with lots of his brothers and sisters, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is some awesome information. Also, there's a lot of debate over whether Joseph Smith did a reading of the Book of Mormon off of a seer stone, or if he did translation from the Urim and Thummim. And I think this also helps settle that. We see that Moroni says that the Urim and Thummim was deposited in the box for the purpose of translating the record. We'll continue. Yet, said he, the scriptures must be fulfilled before it is translated, which says that the words of a book which were sealed were presented to the learned. For thus has God determined to leave men without excuse, and show to the meek that his arm is not shortened, that it cannot save. A part of the book was sealed, and was not to be opened yet. The sealed part, said he, contains the same revelation which was given to John upon the Isles of Patmos. And when the people of the Lord are prepared and found worthy, then it will be unfolded unto them. On the subject of bringing to light the unsealed part of this record, it may be proper to say that our brother Joseph Smith was expressly informed that it must be done with an eye single to the glory of God. If this consideration did not wholly characterize all his proceedings in relation to it, the adversary of truth would overcome him, or at least prevent his making that proficiency in this glorious work which he otherwise would. While describing the place where the record was deposited, he gave a minute relation of it, and the vision of his mind being opened, at the same time he was permitted to view it critically, and previously being acquainted with the place, he was able to follow the direction of the vision afterward, according to the voice of the angel, and obtain the book. This will be the conclusion of this reading of letter 4. There's some parts that I didn't read. I hope you go and read them. I will leave a link attached to the video, either in the description or otherwise, so that you can go to the Joseph Smith papers where you can read all the letters.